Hey there guys, I'm out here in the boat, gonna do a little fishing tomorrow, and so I was just going over my gear and getting prepared, and I thought, well, geez, I should take you guys along with me and just show you a little bit about what I'm doing. The first thing I did is I pulled out one of the rods that I'm flipping a creature bait here, and I just noticed I've got some frays up the line, and it goes, I don't know, about to right about there. And if I'm going to start out, I'd probably fish this a little bit more if I was out on the water. But since I'm just trying to get prepared for the day tomorrow, I figured I should retie in the boat where there's nothing else causing problems, no wind. I'm not in between fish catches. So I thought, geez, I might as well show you what I do. So this one's set up so I can do quite a bit of skipping with it. It's a little shorter rod. I think it's a 7-1 heavy, but it's got a decent enough tip on it, and the rod's short enough that I can skip pretty well with it. So I've put 3 bobber stops on there. I don't know if you can see that too well, but I put 3 bobber stops. Sometimes I only put 2, but when I'm skipping it, I really don't want this weight sliding up. If it does, it just tumbles and you'll backlash pretty easily. But if you keep it, pretty close and tight to the bait, not so it's pressed up against it, but pretty close, it'll skip pretty well still. I've got a 3/8 ounce, yeah, that's what it is, 3/8 ounce tungsten. That's about as heavy as I go if I'm trying to skip it, but it works pretty well, and you can skip that fairly well. If I was just punching or doing something like that, I'm gonna upsize the rod. I'm gonna upsize the weight, that kind of a thing. But when I'm trying to skip it and do a little bit of flipping to cover, this works really well. So I thought I'd show you what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna wet it. These bobber stops slide up a lot easier when it's wet. But I'll cut this off and we'll go through setting this up. I really prefer a straight shank flipping hook. This happens to be the Trocar. I'll show you here. It's the Trocar TK130. The package is a 5/0. I like 5/0, but this one's a 4/0. It happens to be a 4/0. I like it for this particular size of bait. This is a sweet beaver. Where I am, we're in Maine right now. It's pretty cold water, so I like a bait with very little action. I just find that it's more natural in the cold water. So this is a sweet beaver. It really doesn't move at all. It pretty much just goes straight to the bottom with very minimal action. When you're dragging it or hopping it, you get a little bit of movement, but there's not really a whole lot of movement in this, as opposed to, say, when it warms up. I really like the Rage Bug. It moves a lot. It's got a lot of arms. Well, I mean, I can show you, but pull one up here for a second. But it moves, just really, really well. You've got these appendages, and you just pull these off all the way around, and I just open it up. And if you look at it, if you look right here, it's got all these. That's what makes the Rage Bug swim so well. It's got these little swimmers on it. I mean, that thing moves when it goes down through the water. I mean, these absolutely kick. So I really like that in the warmer water. It seems, I don't know, I seem to do a little bit better with a little more movement. But in the cold water, I like something with very minimal action. So I figured I'd show you. I'm going to cut this off, and we're going to start again retying this. It's a little different since I've already got my bobber stops on here, but I'll show you what I do in just a minute. We're going to cut this off. We're going to move up the line past where those, the line's kind of chafed and in rougher shape. And let me just find that right here. It goes to about, yeah, right there. Okay, so we're going to cut that right off. Okay, we can just set that off to the side. So naturally, the first thing you'd put on are the bobber stops. So you'd slide these bobber stops on, and they come on a ring that looks, let me see, I put it somewhere right here, just like that. So if you were sliding them on, you just put your line through the loop here, and you just pull it on over your line. But I already do have mine on there, so you know, you see how to do it. And then I'm going to feed this tungsten weight on, and again, whatever size you want, but I'm going with 3/8 ounce. It falls pretty well, but it's light enough that I can still skip it. So you're just going to feed it through just like that. And then when let's see, I put that hook right here. When I flip with something like this, I prefer a straight shank hook. This is the Trocar. I really like it. I've used quite a few, but I really like it. It's a good sharp point, and it's a stout hook, but it's not too much. But I like to set the hook when I'm flipping cover and make sure I get them out, and it's strong enough that it doesn't really give that much, which I find works much better for flipping cover and pulling fish back out. And then the keeper is pretty good on it, and it gives enough room. I really like to tie a Snell knot. I think it makes a big difference, you know, when you're trying to catch these fish. And the bigger the weight, the more it matters. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. But it's got plenty of shank of hook right here, if you can see, to tie a Snell knot. But the Snell knot, and I will tie it. I'll show you what I'm doing, and then tell you why it's so important, I think, to tie a Snell knot when you're flipping to cover. And the larger the tungsten weight, the more it's important in my mind to use a Snell knot. So we're gonna take our line, we're gonna go right in the eye of the hook, gonna go straight in to the hook side, if you see that. So the line comes in the hook point. We're gonna make a loop, okay? Gonna make a loop, and the end of the line is gonna lay right on the shank of the hook here. So that's the line that we've started with. We made a loop back through, and then we're going to take this, a loop, I don't know, yay big, and we're going to go over the shank. We're going to twist, and we're going to count. That's 1, 2, and we're going to twist every time. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I like to go for 9, and we're just laying it right on the shank of the hook there. If you can see that, every time we twist it, it's just laying on the shank of the hook. We're going to pull this tight. See if we can do this without messing it up. I'm going to pull that loop tight. Okay, oop, I'm not, they're almost getting away from me there. Normally when I'm not trying to show you guys, it's actually a little easier to do, but since I'm trying to show you, there we go. I got it, there we go. You know, what you naturally do, your fingers get in the way of the camera, but you're just laying, and I'm gonna wet it down before I pull it real tight, and I'm gonna just double check this end here as well. Sometimes you probably shouldn't do that. You should probably use pliers, but sometimes I'll use my teeth just to make sure that's nice and tight. And then we're going to cut off the tag end. I don't worry about, I mean, I leave a little bit. It's not going to hurt. If you want to trim it a little closer, I guess you can, but I really don't care that much. The fish aren't going to see it. The bait's going to be over it. So that's what you do. I like at least 7 when I'm turning it and wrapping it around the shank of the hook. I like a minimum of 7. If I can get 9, depending on how long the shank of the hook is, I'll get 9. But 7's kind of my minimum. And then we're going to slide this all back down. And you're going to see why the Snell knot's so important. Again, I just find those bobber stops slide a whole lot easier when the line's a little bit wet. So I'm going to pull them down, something like that. But here's why the Snell knot's so important. Let's say the fish puts this in his mouth. When I set the hook, I'm gonna set the hook, and when I do, it's gonna absolutely, you know, I'm gonna set it. It's gonna pull, and if it's a big weight, even this size, but the bigger we get, the more important it is. That bait's gonna come flying out of his mouth, and it's actually gonna drive his mouth open. So his mouth's gonna pop open, and that hook could come sailing right out of his mouth and never touch him. Well, when you're using a Snell knot, that doesn't really happen very often, because as he's got that whole bait in his mouth, you go to set the hook, and the sinker, this weight right here, is the first thing that's going to hit his mouth and drive his mouth open. But when it does, it instantly pushes, and that hook drives right out. And here's why. The line came through the eye of that hook. I don't know if you can see it, but we went right through the eye of that hook. So when the weight gets pushed against it, well, it wants to push it right to the eye of the hook, right there, almost a 90-degree angle is what it wants. Instead, if you didn't tie a Snell knot, it would be tied to the top of that hook, and when you pull it tight, it's perfectly in line. Well, here it's not. It drives it right over. So when that weight comes out of his mouth, it pops it out, well, that hook point drives right out. So even though the weight's going to come right out, the hook is going to drive up and probably catch him right in the roof of the mouth or the side of the mouth. But oftentimes I find it's right in the roof of the mouth, right where you want it, where it does the least amount of damage to the fish, and it's very strong, so you're going to get them out of the cover and to the boat and land them. And oftentimes it's in there so much that you actually have to drive that hook point out or use your pliers. That's how stuck it is, which is exactly what you want. So I find the Snell knot is fantastic. Now, a downside, and this is a downside, so I don't want to hide it from you, but if you're pulling it out of cover, it's going to do the same exact thing. So let's say you're kind of stuck on a tree limb or in some heavy vegetation. Well, you know, that sinker, you're going to pull it, and yeah, that's going to kick out to the side as well and have more chance of getting hung up. But I feel like the fact that you can connect to the fish a lot better and land a lot more fish when they bite is worth it to me. But for some guys, they say, no, absolutely not. I'm gonna tie a Palomar knot or whatever knot you really like. So it's perfectly in line and it comes out of the cover a little cleaner. I understand that, but for me, I find I get a lot more, hookup. My hookup percentage goes way up if I use a Snell knot. And I've even done it on a worm hook before. I had a time that I was fishing a tube, and I like a tube for skipping. It skips insanely well, and it was the same thing. It was a little lighter weight. I think I was using even like a quarter ounce or something like that. But I had a couple bobber stops, quarter ounce, using a tube hook, not weighted. The hook wasn't weighted, but it was weedless style tube hook, and I kept missing those fish. I mean, I would skip under a dock, you'd get a bite, they'd be swimming away with it, and they have it. I mean, they have it. They're swimming away with it. You'll wind down to them, set the hook, and right out of their mouth. I mean, just every time. I mean, this probably happened 5 times in a row, and I said, this is ridiculous. And most people would never tie a Snell knot in that situation, but I thought, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to try it. I'm going to tie a Snell knot. And I did, and I didn't miss another fish that day, and I probably caught 40 fish. And after the Snell knot, it made that big a difference, even on a weedless tube, bait hook. So I've really got to where I believe in this, and yes, you do get hung up a little bit more, but I think it's worth it when you're actually trying to catch fish. That seems more important to me than losing a hook now and then in a bait. So that's what I do. I find it works very, very well. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. And if you disagree with me, that's okay. A lot of good fishermen do, and there's a lot that kind of go the same direction that I go. But let me know what you find. Good luck.